Okay, I'm Jerry Meehl. I'm a senior scientist here at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, and I study aspects of climate variability and climate change.
Awesome. So we had been chatting before. Obviously, the topic for today is this drought, which seems to be turning into something that is really kind of a bit of a historic event, at least the most powerful drought that we've seen in a quarter century or more, and we're still in the middle of it with no end in sight. What does it look like from your end?
Well, we had a lot of kind of antecedent conditions. So we had extremely dry conditions in the first half of this year. A lot of that was due to just a contribution from the second year of a 2-year La Nina event, which is when the tropical Pacific sea surface temperatures are a little bit cooler than normal, and that usually means that the storms that normally cross the U.S. get pushed a little bit to the north. This last winter and spring, they got pushed quite far north up into southern Canada, so almost the whole U.S., the lower 48, was in warmer and drier conditions, and really record-setting warm and dry conditions. And so we've had this kind of build-up to this. Some parts of the southwestern U.S., like Texas, were extremely dry last year already, and parts of the Midwest, also in association with that La Nina event. Added on top of that, we've had a warming climate and warmer background conditions just make this kind of naturally occurring effects from this La Nina event even worse, because the changes we see from kind of the increasing greenhouse gases produce warmer and drier conditions over parts of the Southwest and even other parts of the U.S. That when added on top of these naturally occurring kind of conditions can make this the conditions now especially severe.
Right, and we see a lot of the reporting where people mention the La Nina connection, but then they don't elaborate, as you have, on the underlying effect of human-caused global warming.
Yeah.
So how would you, how does that help us make a comparison to, say, the droughts of the 1930s or the 1950s?
Well, obviously, the droughts of the 1930s and 50s had a large contribution from internally generated, just naturally occurring conditions. And we know that the Midwest and parts of the Southwest and Western U.S. and other parts of the country are naturally susceptible to major droughts. We can see it going back in time, looking at tree rings and other evidence. So this is something that is a naturally occurring part of the climate system. But I think the climate change aspect, when you overlay on top of that effects from increasing greenhouse gases that are tending to make things warmer and drier anyway, there's more than one thing going on. So you get a contribution from the naturally internally generated part of the climate variability and a contribution from the increasing greenhouse gases.
So in general, we're seeing a pattern of increasing extreme events, and I think NOAA just came out with a paper or a press release discussing the increased incidence of extreme events. Is that something? Have you looked at that? Do you have a take on that?
Yeah. So I think and of course, extremes are a naturally occurring part of our climate system. We've always had heat waves. We've always had cold snaps. We'll have heat waves and cold snaps into the future. But I think what really, when you see the signature of climate change on extremes, is when you see how the records are being set. And when you look at, for example, daily temperature records across the U.S., on any given year, you'd expect to have about an equal chance of record high maximum temperature set and record low minimum temperature set. What we've been seeing is a shift of the odds to a greater chance for record highs to be set and a reduced chance for record lows to be set. For example, in the first decade of this century, the record highs outnumbered the record lows by about a factor of 2 to 1. Last year, the record highs outnumbered the record lows by about 3 to 1. This year, so far this year, record highs have outnumbered the record lows by a factor of about 10 to 1. Now that just shows you how unusual this year has been, that this ratio that's kind of slowly been creeping up with this contribution to this background change in the climate. In other words, the climate's been gradually getting warmer, You'd expect this shift in the odds towards a greater chance for record highs compared to record lows. But this year, this ratio has been so high, it's just 10 to 1. We can't expect that that's going to continue for the rest of the year at that level. But that just kind of shows you how unusual this year has been. And to get conditions that extreme, there usually is more than one factor contributing. And I think part of it is due to human-caused climate change. Part of it's due to this 2-year La Nina event that we're just coming out of. And we've got these kinds of things adding together to produce these really severe conditions.
Well, we're in, is 2012 so far shaping up as, is it the hottest year or nearly the hottest year in the record?
Well, of course, we're only a little over halfway through the year, so it's a little hard to tell so far. But so far, with the number of records that we've seen already, there's probably a good chance it's going to be one of the warmer years, at least for the U.S. Of course, now when you're looking at global climate change, that's a different story. If you go to England, people over there are very upset because it's been so chilly and wet. They're worried the Olympics are going to have problems with the wet conditions, and so you have to kind of look at this in a global perspective. But when you look at these regional climate conditions like we're having right here, that is really consistent with what you'd expect to see, that when we'd have a significant contribution from human-produced climate change, in addition to the regional effects of this La Nina event that we've been experiencing.
Well, is it just because I am biased by watching the news reports, which tend to focus on extreme events, or do we seem to be in a period where many parts of the world are experiencing extremes? The UK is getting quite, not just ordinary rain, they're getting really a lot of rain. So is Japan. They had outstanding flooding in Russia 10 days ago. Is this just an artifact of the news gathering, or are we really in kind of a string of extremes here, as many people feel?
Well, no. Now shifting to the precipitation extremes, that's also a relatively simple physical concept. Is just as the air warms up, just physically warmer air can hold more moisture. So as we have a warmer climate, we have more moisture being held in the air, and that's just a bigger moisture source for precipitation events. So when you do get a storm or a rain event or a snow event, it tends to be a record-setting event because you just have a bigger moisture source in this somewhat warmer air. So indeed, and over the U.S. we've documented that precipitation intensity has increased over the whole country since the late 1950s. So now you can say, well, okay, if precipitation intensity is going up, how come we're having this drought? And the other aspect of precipitation is how it occurs. So if you have a really heavy downpour on one day and then it doesn't rain for another month, and then it rains again, the cumulative effect of those, even though for a given rainfall event, you're getting more intense precipitation. If you have bigger gaps between those storms, on average, then you're going to get drier conditions, and that's what we've been seeing over parts of particularly the southwest U.S. and the Mediterranean region, parts of Australia, other areas around the world where we've seen precipitation intensity still going up, but on average, the conditions are getting drier.
Right. So the paradox is that even though in some areas precipitation may increase, but the increased warmth of the soil will actually continue to dry things out because the soil will dry out faster.
Well, and it's the intensity of the precipitation. So in other words, when you talk about precipitation intensity, that's the amount of rain or snow that comes out of a particular storm. So the kind of per storm rainfall or snowfall has been going up. We've been seeing that going up. We can document that and measure it. So if you get, for example, a big downpour and a lot of it runs off and it's not allowed to soak into the soil, and then the soil dries out and your average temperatures are warmer, and it's a long time until it rains again, on average you're going to get drier conditions. And the warmer air is also going to contribute to increasing evaporation out of the soil, and so you'll get drier soil conditions as a combination of this less frequent rainfall and the warmer conditions.
Just a couple more questions. What do you make of this this so-called derecho event that took place? And I keep getting different pronunciations for that, so bear with me. But obviously, that was something, a word that many people had never even heard before, but apparently,
Including me.
yeah. Okay. So, what do we know about that? Is this an unusual thing? Is this something we're going to see more of, or what?
Well, and this may date me somewhat, because I always learned that what now people are calling derecho is straight line winds. That's what we used to call it more frequently. I think derecho is the same thing. It's just you get really violent downdrafts coming out of big squall lines. It's like pouring water out of a bucket. You know, when the water hits the floor, it just hits and spreads out in all directions and goes out in front of this squall line, and you get these very strong straight line winds. In other words, they're not tornadic. They're not from tornadoes. They're from straight line winds coming out of gust fronts with these real strong downdrafts. So with the increased moisture in the air and the increased precipitation intensity, the storms you're getting, you'd expect associated with that would be somewhat stronger, and the dynamics of the storm would produce possibly stronger downdrafts in these so-called derecho events like this. That's a little bit more difficult to pin down just because we don't have the right measurements to make that. You really need a long time series of Doppler radar measurements made over the whole U.S. that were uniformly calibrated so you could look for trends, and we don't have that kind of data at present. The only way we can look at this is through precipitation intensity from rain gauges. You can just tell, for a given rainfall event, now you're getting more rainfall than we were getting before, and that's an indirect indicator of a stronger intensity of storm systems.
Okay, one last question. What do you look for in this drought situation? Are we looking at any kind of relief coming soon, or what is your outlook?
That's a good question. I was just told by one of our scientists here that it looks like next week we're getting another big high pressure system building over the Midwest, which would indicate we're going to have more severe heat over the next week. We're only halfway through the summer. And when we were having these wildfires here in Colorado, we had one just right behind where I'm working here. Actually, our building was evacuated due to a wildfire that burned just right behind where I work here at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And the comment then, this was in June, we're thinking, geez, this is just June. We got another 2 months, and usually July and August are our hottest months and driest months. What we've gotten a bit of a break from the monsoon moisture flow that's come into the western U.S., in particular in Colorado, which has given us some rainfall. But that really is only helping out the western part of the country right now. The Midwest and the East, of course, don't get affected by that kind of circulation regime. So we're kind of at the mercy of what the weather is going to be doing over the next couple months here this summer.